2, 3, maybe a fourth. They're coming at him, he's beat 6 and 7. Top to Morgans has beaten an 8th.
Oh, wow.
No.
Yeah, let's round out a massive week here on the SuperCoach365 Podcast. Ryan and Tommy back with you one more time before you can have a relax over the weekend. Today, Tommy, we're rounding it out. As I said, it's been a big week, but we're going to talk 2RFs and hookers just to finish it off a little bit. And plenty to get through today as well, and some big names on this list which have big implications on the start of the SuperCoach season especially.
Yeah, for sure. G'day, Ryan. Good to be back again. Some of the biggest names in the game, I guess a few years ago, maybe 2RFs were probably seen as the golden childs of SuperCoach. Maybe not anymore, but they're still pretty integral parts to your team. So can you get stuck into the conversation?
Before we do though, just a reminder that we are coming to you via the podcast streams this year as we did last year, but we are on YouTube as well. So if you haven't already, head on over there, search SuperCoach365. That's where you'll find us. Subscribe to us, turn on your notifications, and while you're there, leave some comments and perhaps even a review as well. Speaking of, Tommy, our socials have gone gangbusters this week, primarily because we're going to be running a overall group, which we sort of spoke about the other day. But we've thrown up $100, absolutely free of charge to play, so 100 reasons to join and 0 reasons not to get involved this year.
Yeah, absolutely. SuperCoach is fun enough on its own, but when you're playing with other people and competing against your mates and us two on the podcast, it'll be even more fun. So I think you told me there's over 200 people in that group at the moment.
There is, and I'll just flash up that code for you one more time. So there it is, the group code, the overall group code. So whoever scores the most points come the year's end, 576855. $100 prize money, absolutely free of charge to play. The only condition is to be eligible for the prize. You do have to follow us on Instagram or Facebook, Twitter, or all three. That might get you looked upon favourably as well. But while we say that, let's get straight into this, Tommy. We're going to chat some ownership percentage before we dive into the 2RF and the hookers. But I think it's probably relevant to do it as well before we sort of dive into what the makeup of our teams look like at this point anyway, because I've had a look and it does seem that there are some popular picks there and starting to see some template teams almost and players that are going to figure in a lot of teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a good look last night at these positions we're going to talk about today and a few others, and really seeing those high ownership percentages on a fair few players, and even talking to you, we've kind of, I guess, agreed on a lot of players. So look, it's always going to happen. There's a lot of players who performed really well last year who just seem like we have to put them in this year. But as we'll talk about in a sec, it's going to make the players that we pick, the points of difference, the players of difference. It's going to make them very crucial this season.
Yeah, and I think we can really spell that out, particularly at the hooker slot, because we'll dive into the number one ranked player in just a moment. But he's out for round one, and it sort of does open up that opportunity for going around the likes of Harry Grant and even Tom Trbojevic. I know he's a lower owned, but suddenly he becomes a pod because you're playing with the best name in the game, and 88% of teams don't have him. So just opens it up. It's probably even more crucial this year, and something that we've spoken about in the past as well. Not having the Q Cup or the New South Wales Cup, it makes it really hard to find the values in the cheapies.
Yeah, I think a lot will come down to that first team list Tuesday, 2 days out before the season, because a lot of these cheapies, well, I know I don't really know them because there's been no reserve grade the last few years, so it's hard to kind of have a handle on who's going to get picked and whatnot. But when you see a few of those cheapies named in the 17s come round one, I think their ownership percentage will be absolutely skyrocketing.
Yeah, and you said that already with Sawali. I think Lachlan Ilias is up around 55% as well. So anyway, enough of that. Let's just dive into this. Actually, before we do, recapping. So this week we've covered off on the fullbacks, the halves, and a bit of draft chat as well with the guys from Weekly Rubdown. So, and next week, of course, stay tuned. We'll cover off on the front row forwards, the CTWs, and then we'll be getting into the team-by-team previews, all before the trials on February 12. Tommy, let's get stuck into this, though, because we are here to talk hookers, and I've already sort of alluded to the man who heads this list. It's no secrets that that's Harry Grant, and he's suspended for round one, so a little bit of a question mark over what looks to be the out-and-out best player in this position.
Yeah, there's a few Storm players, isn't there, suspended for round one, which is kind of throwing the cat amongst the pigeons. But it's hard to argue with his scores last year, averaging 73 and a half. Only really played half of the season, and some of that was even off the bench at times. So he looks, once he gets back on the field this year, he looks to have a clear run at the 9 jersey. And with the Storm being pretty much brilliant every year, it's hard to see him not having a good season.
You see the numbers there on your screen, just 13 games last year, but he was efficient and he did, have a great output when he was on the field. And balancing that and juggling that all with Brandon Smith in the team as well, we asked ourselves this time last year, how was it all going to work? It seemed to work very well for 95% of the season, pretty much right up until that final game where they lost to the Panthers in that final. But otherwise, Harry Grant looks another rock-solid option there. So what do you make of the Melbourne Storm start to the year? Obviously, that easier game against the Tigers, he won't be there, but then clashes against the Rabbitohs and the Eels at home as well. 25% owned. It just shows you that, one quarter of SuperCoach at least thinks that he will overcome that first week being out and go on to kick on.
Yeah, I think it is a pretty big issue that he is missing round 1, because that would have been a great game to start with. But, I think age is on his side as well. He's still a player that's probably on the up. He's still probably working into the best form of his career, so people probably just hoping to cash in on that. I guess the price, maybe 50K more than the next best hooker, could be a deterring factor maybe, but then again, if you like Harry Grant, he won't let you down.
He won't, and as you say there, that'll be his jersey this year. I think even Dale Finucane moving on, we'll see this man play a bit more time in the number 13 role, and that's Brandon Smith, his Storm teammate. 22 games last year for Brandon, and I think to all of our surprise, he played a lot of those games, as we say, at number 9, and his form was just that good that they couldn't move him anywhere else because he was scoring tries what seemed every week, and I held off. I actually didn't hold him the whole season, but I know you got him in, Tommy, and a lot of that was due to that irresistible form that he showed and that try-scoring form that he showed.
Yeah, the try-scoring form indeed. I think he'd scored something like 7 games in a row, but at the same time, you can't really count on that, and that kind of works against him, I think, this year. I don't think you can bank on him scoring a try every week. So I think maybe he's a bit generous to be ranked the second best hooker in the game. I won't be going with him, and suspended for round 1 as well, which again hurts.
Who wears the number 9 for the Storm in round 1? Because I was thinking about this today as I was sort of putting this together, and obviously Harry Grant's not there, Brandon Smith won't be there, Aaron Booth's gone to the Titans. I actually don't know. I don't know who's going to be there.
He's out too.
Yeah,
I've got no idea. They're exactly right. I was thinking of Aaron Booth, and he's moved on as well. So he might be a little, whoever is named there could be a little sneaky, cheapy option, perhaps.
What's Cameron Smith doing in the second week of March? Just before we move on past those two, a question via Instagram today, and we'll get into more of these later, but perfect segue here. Familiar name in the DMs, Pat Sowerby asks us, if we gets to week 2 and Harry Grant is named in jersey 14 and Smith's at 9, not that we're really expecting that, but how are those 25% of SuperCoaches feeling?
Oh, they're closing the game, quitting. No, but it would be a massive shock. It would be very disappointing for the owners for sure, because then he's only getting probably 60 minutes maximum. But I just couldn't imagine happening, especially with, Nelson and Sofa Solomona now leaving the Storm as well. I think it just leaves another gap in their forward pack, and that Brandon Smith would be the lock. You just have to think.
Are you tempted to run Brandon? I'll just bring his numbers up there again and his positional status as well. The fact that he is dual position, will be playing, it doesn't say it there actually, but he is 2RF. He does get in there at this 2RF slot. The fact that he will be playing more of that running role, is that actually going to help his scores, do you think, or will it bring it down? Because as you say, most of his tries are from 2 metres out, barging his way over. Does that help his game, or as his chances as a genuine hooking option in SuperCoach, that he won't be playing hooker?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I really am kind of thrown by the tries last year. Like you said, a lot of his tries were just barge over tries against weak opposition. I don't know. I feel like he can't go any better than he did last year. So I really just think he's a bit too highly priced. I know the price goes off the average, but I couldn't have him, though.
If you're not playing with Harry Grant, another familiar name or another popular name that I've seen in well, it says here only 11% of teams, but I've seen his name spoken about a hell of a lot, and that's Reid Marnie of the Parramatta Eels. Mr. Consistent, and when he can stay fit, he is arguably one of the better hookers in the NRL, not just SuperCoach. His SuperCoach output last year, maybe it certainly surprised me, that average there of about 68. But 11% owned, I kind of expect that number to rise a little bit before round one, particularly as people start to weigh up, well, is it worth running another gun option there at number 9 and not running the cheapie that first week when Grant's out? Do you just go Reid for 1 week and then to Harry Grant if that's the way you're going to play it?
Yeah, well, I think he's just probably the safest option of the hookers. You know, he's only a little bit cheaper than Grant, but he's actually playing round one, and they have a decent first game against the Titans. So you think he scores well there. He'd be a good player to start off with, and he's the sort of player you just know if you kept him across the season, he won't let you down. Like, I think that average of 68, I think you'll just see that again, really. There's no real factor to say that he wouldn't be able to reach those heights again.
Does he play Origin this year, do you think? I know he was close last year, and then I think he made it to camp, and then they sent him home, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he'd be my pick. Well, probably not actually. Harry Grant, sorry, I forget the elephant in the room. But I think he deserves to be in the squad somewhere, perhaps the 14. It depends how Queensland obviously want to go with their bench and whatnot. But they're flush for options now, Queensland, in the 9, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And, you know, speaking of rep hookers, last year when we did this chat about hookers, we led with this man, Damien Cook. Surprising to see him so far down this list, and it is only 3 rungs further down than what he was this time last year. He averaged, I think it was closer to 75 in 2020. So he's dropped down here on last season's form anyway. Tough start to the year for Souths, but 7% owned. That's starting to make me interested. I think the fact that he's so lowly owned is actually making me more keen on Damien Cook, because suddenly there is that pod play from round one, and if he can get back to anywhere near his best, then who's going to be shocked?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think last year, the average of 65, I actually thought it was lower because I just felt like he really did underperform. I think because I owned him in both Classic and Draft for a while, and he was just really disappointing. But I think there was a few big scores there which boosted the average up. So, look, I don't know. I'm probably burnt by him a little bit. I know what you're saying now. He's almost a pod, which is surprising for someone like Damien Cook. But yeah, it's a tough start to the year, so maybe chime in after the first few weeks.
Yeah, I think the draw opens up a little bit after that first month, which is, we've spoken about it already. It's horrendous. But the fact that he is pretty consistent, I think, with his injuries. I can't remember a period over the last couple of years, at least, when Cook's missed a hell of a lot of games. So if he's playing 20-plus games and Souths are anywhere near... You think Adam Reynolds gone, he's going to have a little bit more of a say in the attack, you think?
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you. Does Reynolds leaving and they have a rookie half, does that impact Cook heavily? Does that hurt his game? Does that give him more of a license to run the ball, or does it mean that he's going to have less attacking opportunity?
I'd love to see him run the ball more, and I think everyone would, not just super coaches. But you think of that 2018 Origin series for New South Wales, he was close to their best, probably shaded only by James Tedesco, which is no mean feat. But a lot of that game, particularly that Origin 1 down at the MCG, he just carved them up. And I know he went through, and I think he set up Maloney for a try early, and that was when he was at his best for South. I think they made a prelim that year, lost to the Roosters, and if they did make the grand final and go on to win it, a large part of that would have been to Damien Cook. You'd imagine so. But yeah, to answer your question, I think he has to be a little bit more hands-on this year. Will he be? I guess that's up to discretion of the coach. Coming to the next hooker here on this list. Now, he's the 5th ranked hooker, but we don't have a hell of a lot to go on, do we, Tommy?
No, we don't. But I must say, when I first sat down to do my team a couple of weeks ago when the team picker came out, this was the first guy I put on my side, Karen McInnes. I really like him. Obviously, last year didn't play with the injury, and he was signed to the Sharks. So we've kind of known for a long time that he was coming to the Sharks, and we've had a long time to prepare for him. And I just like his price. I like the fact that he's dual position, averaged 76 in 2020. I'm really excited to have him on the side.
Yeah, those numbers you saw on your screen then, that average, as you say there, from the 2020 season, which when, he was probably one of the best SuperCoach players that year. I think if he was fit last year, he's probably a top 5 draft pick. At least a top 10. Top 5 is probably maybe a little bit generous, but he was the second best ranked hooker, I think second only to Cameron Smith, heading into that season when he did do his ACL.
No, exactly right. And obviously last year we saw massive attacking stats boosted by those fullbacks and that, but I still think McInnes would have been up there. And to be, 100,000 less than Harry Grant, and he could play either second row or hooker. And we probably like Cronulla this year. We keep saying that we think going to have a good season. I think he's 34% owned. It's not surprising, really.
Sort of the question I'll ask you about, although I did ask you about Brandon Smith, does it actually help his game, his SuperCoach game, that he's not playing hooker and that he will be a runner? Look, thinking back to McInnes and his style as a second rower or as a lock in this case, I can't remember him going to the line like an Isaiah Yeo a hell of a lot for the Dragons and tipping on. That was more of Jack DeBellin around that same period. But otherwise, I think McInnes, I actually don't know what to expect from him from number 13. I think he's just going to be a defensive workhorse and sort of like that Paul Gallen sort of 13.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It might depend on what Fitzgibbon wants him to do as well. But I agree with you. I don't remember him playing like a Murray or anything, like a ball player. But just looking at his scores from 2020 and whether he was playing 9 or 13, it didn't really matter. He pretty much averaged the same amount of points per game. So
yeah,
hopefully that form from 2 seasons ago can hold up this year because, I really think he's a great price.
And a pretty good start to the year as well in terms of fixtures. The Raiders, the Eels and the Dragons. So it doesn't have to wait long to play his old team, Cam McInnes. Let's move on to one of the most popular picks at number 9. And who would have thought we've been saying this a couple of weeks ago? And probably, in no small part due to his cheap status. But Chris Randall here of the Newcastle Knights. Says he's a fullback there again. Sorry for that. He's obviously playing hooker. $245,000, 5 appearances only in 2021. Look, his average not great. His positional rank speaks for that. But you see there that gold number on your screen, 49% owned. He's going to be the popular pick.
Yeah, and I think you almost have to have him, don't you, really? When Jaden Brayley went down a couple of weeks ago with that injury, this guy became a real key player in the game. And just looking at that last round last year, I forget who they played off the top of my head, but 54 points from base stats. That really stands out. And if he can, play big minutes with the Knights, that's great numbers for a player that's only 245K.
Are you worried about his rotating role? And do we need him to play 80 minutes? I don't think we do, to be honest. At that price, if he plays 55, 60 minutes, we're probably happy.
Yeah, he's not someone I'm probably going to spend the whole year with unless he's goes really well, but I don't know what to expect from Newcastle. Really, I don't know what their hooking depth is like, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it was either Randall, Kurt Mann, but Kurt Mann, he could play anywhere from 1 to 13. He might not do a great job, but I think that's his sort of role. Like, he's their version of a Mr. Fix-It, and I think they had plans for him to spend time in the back row anyway this year, Kurt Mann. So if he's getting through defensive work in the middle, then it's probably not too much different to playing hooker. But there are other names here, dual position players, which we could talk about, but we might hold one of those over for the 2RF conversation because I think he's going to feature quite heavily in a lot of teams, that name there. But just wrapping up this hooker chat, Tommy, is it a case of Harry Grant for round 1, or are you tempted to play around Harry given the fact that he is out and maybe run as someone like a Marnie or a Cook?
Yeah, I'm going to go around Harry Grant. I know the other day I was keen on Munster, but then you really reminded me there's going to be out for the first week, so I had to rethink that too. So I don't really want to be without a gun hooker for round 1. I think Cam McInnes is who I'm going to settle on, and I'm honestly probably happy to play him out unless he's injured or playing awfully. I'm pretty happy to pick and stick with him. Yeah,
and for now I've got Grant, but I might get itchy feet closer to kick off, and I think I've just done what 49% of other super coaches have done there, is just putting Chris Randall for that first week, hope he can churn out 50 and then run Grant on the field and maybe shift Randall to the bench in weeks 2 and beyond. I just want to bring up something that we put on our Instagram some time ago now. back in November about Cam McInnes, and we were sort of having a guess of where he would go, particularly in draft ranks. I said he might have been a top 5 pick last year, if not for that ACL, if he was fully fit, or at least a top 10. I think he definitely goes late first round or early second round in this year's drafts. But it's going to be a big punt, a bloke coming off an ACL that hasn't played footy for some time, especially under these new rules.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor that I probably haven't considered enough. It's a long time away from the game and a bad injury to have. So you are kind of crossing everything that he comes back in the same form. Mm-hmm. But if he does, I'm with you. He'd probably be around, maybe 10th draft pick, something like that.
On this post here, I've said runs, tackles, tackle busts, offloads. McInnes' points per minute could easily soar beyond 1.1. And given the fact that he averaged 76 in 2020, I think every class player's average has risen since then. I think maybe barring Tedesco, who might have dropped slightly. But you look at all the other big names, they've all gone up. And I think that's, again, in any old case, due to the fact that these new rules have opened up the game a hell of a lot more.
It's almost like the house prices, mate. Inflation. You can't compare it. Everywhere, everything's just gone up.
Shan't be buying a house, but I might be buying Cameron McInnes from round 1. Tommy, let's leave it there for the hookers. We'll come back after this short break and chat everything happening in the second row. And believe me, there's plenty to get through.
Having a bet on the racing this week? Top this.
With Top Sport's best of the best multis, top odds are guaranteed. Place a best of the best multi during Saturday Metro meetings for the top flug or dividend from the best 3 national totes. Plus, there's best of the best to win up to $5,000 too.
Top that. Download the app today. Top Sport. Feel the excitement.
Don't let the game play you. Stay in control. Gamble responsibly.
Yeah, welcome back. SuperCoach365 Podcast, brought to you by topsport.com.au. Massive weekend of racing and sport coming up as well. So if you are having a play this weekend, why not do it with Top Sport? Do it responsibly. And if you are a new customer, you can use the promo code SCoach365 at sign up, just so Tristan and the guys know that you've found your way to us via us. And believe me, I think they'll look after you if you go through it that way as well. Tommy, second row forwards, an integral part of SuperCoach teams. And I know that you've, in the past, traditionally built your teams around this position. I asked you the question middle of last season, are centre wingers the new 2RFs? But I think you haven't swayed your thoughts. You're still going to build your team heavily around the high-scoring forwards.
Yeah, I still like them. But I do think last year, if you went that way, you kind of got burnt because all the big scores were in the CTWs and fullback. But just going back historically, remember the days of Paul Gallen, Corey Parker. They were the 2 greatest SuperCoach players. 10 years ago, they were second rowers. But I don't know. Maybe I'm looking in the past. It's probably not as important now, but there's still some absolute gun players which we're going to look at in a sec.
Yeah, and I actually put that question to you, as I said, because I did have players at my disposal, and again, looking through our own draft lens here, but Brian To'o, Reuben Garrick, he was incredible last year, Josh Adokar, Alex Johnston, these high-ceiling players that just didn't seem to have a floor last year because they were in good teams and they were just scoring heaps of tries. But as I'm putting my team together this year, I can't bring myself to spend 700,000 upwards on a To'o or on a Garrick. But you could nearly make a case for doing it for David Fifita, which goes against completely everything that I've just said there.
Well, it's just hard to say. It just depends. I think last year was just one of those seasons no one could predict, as in the amount of blowout scores, teams just racking up points. The SuperCoach scoring was ridiculous. Can it happen again? Will the less 6 agains bring it back to the field maybe? I don't know. I'm kind of hoping so, because it was a bit crazy last year. If you didn't have Turbo, you couldn't even compete.
Yeah. And it's funny. Maybe I should have asked you, are 2RFs the new CTWs? Because David Fifita, this man, he scored more tries than Brian To'o. So he scored 17 tries to To'o's 14. Again, going against everything I say there about the high ceiling backs and not spending money on the 2RFs. But this guy's probably the exception to that rule because he is just an absolute freak what he can do.
Yeah, it was incredible last year, wasn't it, really? Some of those individual tries that he would score. Little spoiler, I've got him in my team at the moment, but I am just looking back, I think it's 6 of the last 7 games or something like that. He started from the bench. So is that a worry heading into 2022?
I don't know if it's a worry. I think it definitely changed. Maybe it was a wake-up call to him. I don't know. I think in those games, you can tell me now, you're probably looking at it. How many times did he come off the bench and score a try? It seemed like 80% of them at least. It was almost Titans would get into a game, there'd be 20 minutes, 25 minutes in, they'd be down by 12 points, 18 points, whatever it was. And you just think, okay, they'll bring Fifita on, he'll score. They'll down by, cut the deficit. But 18% ownership, again, I think that's, some people are hesitating because of that price. But is he someone you build a team around?
I think I'd like to. I'm hoping that his kind of age and maturity levels increase. What is his age going to increase this year? But his maturity levels increase this year, because I think last year he kind of seemed a bit disinterested at times, and he's only young, and his performance in Origin wasn't great. So, yeah, look, I'm just hoping his whole demeanour can be a little bit improved, because the scores are there, 85 average. I think there's still room for improvement for him.
I found it interesting today when I was reading that Tino Sumaliawi was being considered as a captaincy option by Justin Holbrook. Now, he's 2RF eligible, Tino, but we'll probably talk about him in the front row slot, because that's probably predominantly where he plays, aside from lock forward. But Tino as a captain ahead of Fifita, I mean, would the captaincy bring out the best in Fifita? I know it's hard to bring a bloke suddenly off the bench and make him your captain, but would that just maybe sharpen him up a bit and keep him involved for 80 minutes? Because it seems like he only wants to be involved in that final 30 metres to score tries.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it could work one or two ways. He could just really not handle responsibility. But if he was captain, he could really thrive. I think Tino probably strikes me as more of a leader than Fifita. But look, I honestly think Fifita should just be left to his own devices. Hopefully he can find that in himself to be a bit more, mature and consistent. But he's just got to stay on that edge, give him the ball when they're on the front foot, and let him do his thing.
Yep. I mean, it's simple, isn't it? Just give him the ball. He's bigger and stronger than 99% of other players in the NRL, especially from that far out. And Pat Herbert probably wishes that he gave him the ball in that semi-final as well. I have built my team predominantly around, I've already said it in our other podcasts this week, around Nathan Cleary and having 2 gun fullbacks. So for now, I don't have him. I've heard some other podcasts say that he is right up there in the calculations. If you're not building a team around Turbo or Cleary, that it has to be Fifita. But again, I just can't bring myself to spend that money on him, because I know that he does have quiet games, and I'd be too quick to pull the trigger on him, because it's frustrating to watch. You want someone of that price tag being involved and touching the ball 20, 25 times a game.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a risk. Like I said before, he may not even start. So there's some things you definitely have to consider. I didn't have him in my team until a couple of days ago where he did it, and then I decided I just wanted him. But it could change before then. So, look, I don't know. I'll probably watch the trials with interest, see how fit he looks, and we'll go from there.
Speaking of Fifita's changing role towards the back end of last season, so too did this man, Isaiah Papalii of Parramatta Reels. Spent a bit of time in the middle at different stages throughout the season, and there's talk that he will be rotated through their forwards this year, their middle forwards, that is. 23 games last year. Impressive average, which no one would have seen coming. I dare say in majority of draft leagues, he would have escaped the draft and probably been that first week waiver pickup. He or Nico Hines. Position rank 2, just 10% owned heading into the new season. And I'm not going to say it's an easy start to the year by any stretch, because they have the Titans. Funnily enough, he'll come up against Fifita, you'd think. And then an improved Sharks team, we think. And then away to Melbourne. So Isaiah Papalii at that price tag, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it will. But like you said, last year, I think we were in a draft comp with 12 teams and none of us picked him up in the draft. But then, unsurprisingly, he was first off the waivers after round 1. He kind of tapered off a little bit towards the end of the year. A couple of scores in the 40s there. Just Eels weren't going that well, though. So, look, I don't know. He's hard to argue with what he did last year, isn't it, really? I just think there's a lot of competition at Para in the forwards for spots.
He's already signed to the West Tigers. Does that impact his play, do you think, for the next season?
And it could impact, I guess, how much emphasis and how much they want to use him this year, the Eels, maybe they'll be looking towards, the future and not have him as such a focal point of their play. I'm not going with him at the moment, but I couldn't knock people for doing it. He could repeat the dose again.
I mentioned Fifita scoring a heap of tries. It seemed to me that Papalii scored a heap of tries, probably skewed towards more the start of the season as well. But he was a real attacking source, just as much as he was, an emphasis getting out of their own end and making tackles. I think that first game against the Broncos, he had a 54, 56 base, which made him just a dream to pick up off the waivers. And then he suddenly started scoring tries, and there was a point there last year where if you didn't have him in your classic team, you were kicking yourself that you didn't get him in earlier.
Yeah, if he's playing second row, he's a real, strike weapon, kind of like Fifita almost. Give the ball to him, 10 out, and he'll probably do the job. I think also the other Eels second row, Madison, we haven't really talked about him here, we won't, but he's probably worthy as well to be talked about in the likes of Papalii. I think the Eels forward pack overall is very good. So I'm going around them, but definitely our ones to watch.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a couple of teams and those that have sort of gone that 500, 550 to 600k mark on the 2RFs without blowing the budget and going Papalii or Fifita. Feature teams like Madison, those teams have featured players like Madison, purely because we know what he can do. And he's a try-scoring back rower as well, but I think he had a couple of games last year where he did score tries and finished with 70. So, yeah, the Eels back row, it's an interesting one to keep our eye on this year. For mine, no, Papalii, no go to start with, but if that price falls or if he is just churning out big numbers, you might have to get him in, maybe at the expense of someone like this, an Angus Crichton, who this time last year, Tommy, I think we both had him as probably the best second row option in the game. I started with him last year. I think it might have even been around that price or maybe even a little bit more expensive than that. But I think he started, I won't say slowish. He definitely picked up, I think, as the season went on. 18 games last year, averaged just about 75, 18% owned. Luke Keary back, I think, helps Angus Crichton, and a good couple of fixtures there at the SCG where we know they love playing, they love scoring tries to start off for the Roosters.
Yeah, well, I said Reid Marnie was the safety option for the book because I think Crichton is the safety option for the 2RFs because I think Fifita and Papalii, he could be a bit hit and miss at times, but Crichton, you just know what you're going to get with him. Every week last year is almost getting 80. You could set your watch to him, really. And like you said there, the Roosters, we're pretty confident they'll go well with Keary coming back and whatnot. So I have him in my team because I pretty much just want to play that I can bank on getting 70 every week.
Yeah, solid vice captaincy option, I think, Angus Crichton, because you're going to get 70, and if you can score a try, then he's probably going upwards of 100. Although you might not be looping so often this year as well. But anyway, still, maybe if you want to play a safe captaincy option, Angus Crichton probably not the worst shout there as well. I don't have him at this stage. I did in a couple of teams that I tried to put together, but I've shifted. I've gone a little bit cheaper in the 2RF slot. As I said, spent money elsewhere that I can't afford players like Angus, as much as I'd love to have him. Big fan of Angus Crichton and his work at the Roosters. Next up, a player I know you're a big fan of, Tommy, Cameron Murray of the South Sydney Rabbitohs, the new captain there at the Foundation Club. What are we expecting from the Rabbitohs this year? I know we've sort of touched on it there with Damien Cook, but Cameron Murray, I think he has a real chance to almost redefine what this South Sydney team's about, and he's going to have to play a little bit more ball playing now with Adam Reynolds gone as well. Yeah,
well, I don't know how he could play more ball playing because I feel like he barely took a hit up last year, but just watching him closely, I had him in drafts, so I was always kind of hoping he would take a run, but he's great with his hands, great at those late little balls at the line. I guess it just depends on how Souths go, a lot of it. I think a lot of the South teams a bit of a risk at the moment, just with no halfback and new coach. He doesn't play 80 minutes either, which kind of annoys me.
And he's possible, he's capable of playing 80 minutes. I think he's fit as, and I don't know. South's forward stocks to me don't seem incredible. That might not be being harsh, but I think there's every chance if he plays 80 minutes, suddenly he's an 80 average 2RF and arguably second best option behind Fifita, if not the best option overall.
Yeah, I think last year him and Jai Arrow are kind of eating into each other's minutes a little bit. They're both really good SuperCoach players if they played 80, but they're kind of playing, 60 each. So he has potential. Like you said, if he played 80, I think he'd be worthy of being picked, but I'm just a bit worried about that, yeah.
You mentioned Arrow there. I think a lot of the predicted teams and stuff that I've been looking at have Arrow probably on an edge, which isn't terrible as well. And at his price, I think he averaged, as I'm saying this, you could probably look it up, but I think he averaged about 62 towards the back end of last year. And as the season went on, he just got more and more involved and influential in South's play and their style. And I'm going to say he was a big reason why that they probably surprised the Panthers in that first week of the finals and very nearly sprung an upset in the grand final as well.
Yeah, I never probably thought of him as an edge player. I don't know. Going back to the Titans, I thought he was more of a lock. But he did play well in the second row, looking at his scores last year, late on, and he had a pretty big influence in games. So they have a pretty strong forward pack, but their depth isn't probably great. So you'd hope that Murray and Arrow both get decent minutes.
Yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on. And if you are playing around that mid-range or a little bit cheaper than these options, then Jai Arrow maybe not the worst shout as well. You would have got a flash up there on your screen a little bit earlier than we anticipated. But next man here on our list, Tevita Pangai Jr. Incredible. I think what this man can achieve, and when he sets his head straight, which is probably not as often as we'd like it to be, but 18 games last year, a rough year for him off the field, 65 points per game. He gets in here as the 10th best 2RF option, just 30%, well, I shouldn't say just 30% owned. He is 30% owned, which is pretty high. And a new club, and we're expecting a new role on an edge outside Matty Burton. It looks prime real estate out there at the Doggies.
Yeah, it does, but I'm surprised by the ownership. I just, having watched him for the past few years and owned him at various times, God, he's hard to trust. He'll have a great game and then he'll be suspended for 3 weeks. So, I don't know. I just don't need the headache this year.
Yeah, it's a concern, the suspensions, but I think, I don't want to say the Broncos are a bad club, but we saw him at a good club, maybe a more simple role at the Panthers as well, coming off the bench and playing through the middle. I thought he was really good and unlucky to miss out on that grand final appearance. And comes to the Bulldogs, it's a very different Bulldogs team to what we've seen the past couple of years. I think he's going to be a focal point in their attack, almost like Fifita at the Titans. So you could maybe see that average of 65 going up.
Oh, very, very capable of doing that. And I think he's a good comparison to Fifita, a few more years, maybe a bit more of a mature head, if you could use that about Tevita Pangai. But he has the potential to be one of the best second rowers in the game. I don't know. I'd just rather see it first before I bank on him doing it.
Yeah. And he was around that Origin squad in 2018-19 for New South Wales before I think he declared his allegiance to Tonga. So shows you he is capable of being one of the best forwards in the game when he sets his mind to it. I like him. I'm with him. I'm all over him this year. I think he's ready for a big one. He's dual position as well, which really helps. I ran some numbers in the off-season to suggest, trying to pick out the best front rowers. Payne Haas was a standout, but weighing all things up, price, I think change of role, dual position, I had TPJ as the second best front rower. And I know we're talking second row options here, but the fact that he is dual position again, I think it really helps his cause for super coaches in 2022. Speaking dual position, Tommy, this man, now we've already touched on him, or alluded to him in the hookers section, and a man which has been very well found by super coaches putting their teams together, Reuben Cohen, 13%. I probably expected this number to be a lot lower, but I think the fact that he is dual position and gets in at a pretty good price there as well, expecting him to play maybe in a lock position this year for the Cowboys if Taumalolo doesn't get vaxxed or if Taumalolo moves to prop. So what are we making of Reuben Cohen?
Well, that's the big question. Where's he going to be? Is he going to be in the first 13? Because I like the look of him and he's had some pretty good scores when he's played, but I'm just concerned about where he's going to be. Obviously 13%. A lot of people think he's going to make the side. There's a lot of young Cowboys forwards, which I don't really know where they're going to play. Helam Lukey, Griffin Neem. There's so many of them. So their team this Tuesday will be really interesting come March.
Yeah, and we haven't spoken of those other names, Nanai, Lukey, and such, but definitely they'll come into calculations closer to that first team list Tuesday. And again, when we start watching some trial footy, and this conversation will be completely different than if we suddenly have two genuine mid-range options playing big minutes at their clubs. But speaking of, again, probably no better segue than that exact point to Wade Graham. Can you believe that Wade Graham is the 79th ranked 2RF option? I don't think, and I know it's footy versus SuperCoach, but he is not the 79th best second row forward in the NRL.
Oh, no, exactly right. You are 100% there. I've actually got him in my side. It's a pretty random pick, and it could change before the season starts, but I'm just kind of banking on his old form. I know he's had so many injuries and he's getting older now, but if he could just stay fit in this pretty good Sharks team playing on an edge, I can see him just getting, 55 every week. And at that price, I'm happy just to take that as a score.
Yep.
Even he's attacking, his work with ball in hand can be really good as well. So, he could be good for a try or a try assist too.
Bring up those numbers just one more time. 11 games last year. So that's why that average is down. Obviously, he was injured and coming back and in and out of the team. Just 3% owned. So Tommy's one of the 3%. And what you've said to me there, I'd find it hard not to be part of that, to be honest. I'm looking at him now, certainly. Good start to the year for the Sharks. He is their captain. So you expect him to play. He's traditionally an 80-minute player. I know he's getting older, Wade Graham, but he does love being out there. And you mentioned of him being an attacking player. Again, I don't know for certain, but I can see Nico Hines throwing Kenny Bromwich over for a couple of tries last year. So maybe it's the case now with the left edge forward at the Sharks and Hines sweeping around Moylan or whatever it is. Wade Graham, he is not an out-and-out try-scoring back rower like a Fifita or so, but in his day, he was pretty handy at finding the line.
No, exactly right. And he's, like you said there, captain of the club. I think he's like a proud player. He'd like to get back to his best and have a really good season before he eventually retires. And just looking at the other options around his price range, there's really not much there, I didn't think. I thought he probably had the most upside. So I went with him, but I think I'm putting a lot of eggs in the Sharks basket this year with McInnes, Graham. I even spoke up Matty Moylan the other day. So hopefully they go well.
Yeah, they might leave you black, white and blue if they leave you damaged come the end of the season. But no, I think what you say there about Wade Graham, he's a professional. I know he's going to have his body right heading into the new season. And the head knocks are a concern because I think coming back off that, was it an ACL he did in 19 for 20 or 18 for 19, and then he's had some head knocks since. So not that you can really prepare for that, but I know personally I've spoken to him. He says that he's feeling good and he's looking forward to a new season. So he feels clear in the head anyway.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's a big one, concussion, isn't it? We've seen a few players go through that lately. So fingers crossed he can get through the start of the season unscathed and work into the season well.
Now, we've thrown some names out there like Cotter and Graham. That might leave you with more questions than answers. So let's take a break. We're going to come back after this short break and we're going to answer your questions from our mailbag.
Having a bet on sport this week? Top this.
Whether you're into cricket and curling or golf and greyhounds, Top Sport will let you on for plenty. And with literally hundreds of markets from your own backyard to the international stage, Top Sport has you well covered. So if you want to get the top odds every time, bet with Top Sport.
Top that. Download the app today. Top Sport. Feel the excitement.
Don't let the game play you. Stay in control. Gamble responsibly.
Welcome back, SuperCoach365 Podcast, talking sport. Tommy, have you been watching much of the Aussie Open? Phenomenal last couple of nights of tennis.
Yeah, well, I've never seen the doubles get more broadcasts than they have this year, that's for sure. And the two Aussies, obviously, in the final tomorrow night, as we come to you now. So that'll be a good watch. Who are you tipping for the title?
Oh, I hope they win it. In terms of the men's singles, it's hard to go past the favourite Medvedev, although I think Nadal's just put on a clinic this afternoon, so he's always going to be tough to beat. Big weekend of sport, as we say. Topsport.com.au, they have you covered. BBL final on as well, so plenty to look forward to this weekend as we soon to be casting our eyes forward to a big season of NRL. Tommy, let's answer some questions here, and there are a couple, so I might just cherry pick a couple of these. Start at the bottom there, Shazza04. Is McInnes too risky playing lock? I'll let you answer this one and give us your thoughts why it's not a risk, perhaps.
Well, I'm predominantly thinking it's not a risk because I look back to his scores last time when he played lock and it didn't go down at all from hooker. So where he's playing really doesn't matter with McInnes, or didn't last time anyway. I think he should score well in any position. I suppose the only risk is his body and if he's fully fit, ready to go after the big injury.
Blake's Brushworks here asks us, sorry, I'll just turn that microphone down there. Blake's Brushworks asks us, I think Reid is in for a big one. Reid Marnie, that is. He has a locked-in future with the Dogs now and is on the verge of a Queensland debut. Blake's Brushworks at Instagram. That's Blake's Brushworks with an X. Best painter in Sydney. And he asked a good question there, Tommy.
Yeah, great painter, Blake. Like we said before, he's a good safety option this year. I guess maybe even a Queensland debut if something's wrong with Harry Grant, or he could be on the bench. So you're pretty keen on Reid as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I don't have him for now, but certainly can make a case for having him. I think the Eels have got a tough draw overall over the course of the season. They do have pockets, and I think their first 6 or 7 games isn't too bad. So he does have a lot of attacking stats, does Reid Marnie, but again, I don't think that should sway you from picking a player. If that's the way that the team plays and he jumps out and hits his forwards short, then so be it. It's hard to stop, obviously. Next one here, we haven't spoken to this. Alex Brigo asks Jack Howarth as a cheapie option. Jack Howarth, of course, the Melbourne Storm. Just signed a 5-year deal, which the Storm don't often sign players to 5-year deals, so they obviously have big raps on this kid. And from seeing a few highlights on YouTube and such, a former rugby union product coming through the Brisbane college system, so maybe some similarities there to Angus Crichton, what he did through Scots College and then finding his way to South and then the Roosters.
Yeah, well, I feel like if we're seeing a 5-year deal for the Melbourne Storm, they obviously have a pretty good opinion of him because they're not just handing them out for nothing down there, are they? I don't really know much about him, but I'm assuming if he's thought of that highly, you probably see a pretty high percentage of ownership.
Two RFs that we didn't mention here, which I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't. Curran and Aitken. 2 good options in their own right, but the question's more about the impact of Sean Johnson upon their game. Does that help them? Does that hurt them? For what it's worth, I've got Curran in my team at the moment. I think he's a great option to start the season and try-scoring player. He's always around the ball. So Curran, a yes for mine. Aitken, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, Curran last year was almost like a Papalii a little bit. Hadn't really heard of him, and then he came out and was one of the best second rowers, really. I think SJ being in the team is only going to help. Their halves last year was a bit of a merry-go-round with SOS and Chanel Harris Tevita. So I don't know, hopefully some stability there will help. Will Uine can play in the second row from the start, do we think?
That's the talk, and I think he's confirmed that on Instagram himself, that he will be there. So, but again, just because he plays there for round 1, 2 doesn't mean he's going to be there rounds 24, 25. So at the price, it's sort of an awkward price to play him in your centre wing, which is where you'd probably want to play him. Sort of that in-between price. He's not cheap, but again, I'm not sold. And I could be made to look very silly, but yeah, I'm just not sold on Aitken in the back row. I mean, he played all right there to end the season, but I'm not banking on that, as I say, for 25 rounds. Pat Salby asks us... Sorry, we've already answered that one at the start. We'll move past that one about the impact of Harry Grant, what that means to be on the bench. If you missed it or you're just tuning in late, you can catch that in our hooker preview at the start of the podcast. A couple of questions here, just saying TPJ, we've covered off. Reuben Cotter, somewhat covered off. Mitchy Muscat asks us, again, plenty of interest in Cam McInnes here. Is he a must-have in your eyes, Tommy? I know you've got him, but I know you've sort of explained that you're not worried about his role, but is he a must-have at the price? Because he does get in at... I think the price is what would get people in.
I don't like declaring must-haves because there's no such thing. You can make your team how you want, but he's the closest thing I have to a must-have. I just think at the price, I thought it would be a lot more than probably in the 500s. And the fact that he can cover 2 really important positions, he's definitely as close to must-have as you can get in my eyes.
Certainly going to help around Origin time as well. And I know McInnes was in the Origin squad end of 2020, but he won't be there this year. Just easing his way back into the NRL after that injury. Another one here from Logan Nosti. Tariq Sims. Speaking of Origin, Tariq Sims. We didn't even mention him, but incumbent Blues second rower. I haven't actually looked at his price, but just as a part of that system, is he at the Knights now, or is he at the Dragons? I think he's going back to the Knights, isn't he? Eventually.
I tell you, he has not been on my radar. He hasn't been on my radar at all. I was surprised, I guess, to see him in Origin, but he did a good job. He's the sort of player that he'll do a job anywhere, really, no matter where he's playing. But he's not really on my radar to be my team.
No, not on mine. Clearly, I don't even know where he's at. I think he did sign to go back to the Knights, but it might be after this year, because I know he was again playing great footy middle of last year, but didn't have a club. Dragons extended the contract. I think he's off to the Knights 2023. So that's where the confusion comes from there. Last question here before we wrap it up from the Cashos on Instagram. Says best team links for second row halves and centres. So I guess sort of alluded to the Burton TPJ combination at the Dogs. Maybe it's Cleary and Liam Martin at the Panthers, or is it a Nico Hines and Wade Graham in your case, Tommy, at the Sharks? I don't know. I haven't really thought about this too much, but it's definitely a good question to start thinking about.
Yeah, well, those links are important, are they? I've probably in the last few years didn't think about that. The sort of having a half and then the second row combination. But I remember last year even two players who probably were always injured and probably not the greatest players to talk about, but SJ and Nakora, they were a good lightning lethal combination there on that right hand side. So if you can find that, especially in draft, if you can get those two players that can combine, definitely a big benefit to your team.
I'm sure there's some others, like maybe Kiri and Angus Crichton. I think Kiri back helps Crichton. I can just see Kiri just putting Crichton through holes, and Sam Walker did it a couple of times last year. I remember that one on the Gold Coast. Remember threw Crichton through and Crichton stuck his tongue out before he'd even scored the try. So again, it probably just stands out because it was such a memorable try. But that's where we'll leave it for today, Tommy. Another big episode, and it's been a big week, hasn't it? And plenty to look forward to next week as well.
Yeah, we've got two positions left. The CTWs and the front row forwards. Found the CCWs to be really hard this year. Other than a few big names, I don't really know where to spend the cash. So be good to have a chat about that next week, and then probably be time for almost trial matches after that.
Yep, we'll get stuck into some research over the weekend as well as maybe a hard-earned first as well. Tommy, big week. Well done to you. In the meantime, until then, follow us on socials at SuperCoach365. It's been good. Until next time, we'll speak to you then.